The crying wouldn't stop. James pressed the phone to his ear, his hands trembling as he listened to the stranger's hesitation on the other end of the line. "Please," he whispered, swallowing his pride with each syllable. "I've never asked anyone for money before, but my son hasn't eaten in hours." In the background, 3-month-old Elijah's hungry wails filled their cold apartment, each cry piercing James's heart like a knife. He had dialed the number thinking it belonged to his brother. Instead, he'd reached someone named Sarah, a complete stranger who now held his desperate request in her hands. What happened next would change both their lives forever. If you've ever wondered whether a simple mistake could lead to something beautiful, hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories that restore faith in humanity. Sometimes our darkest moments connect us to the light we never knew we needed. James Parker stared at the empty cabinet for the 5th time, as if somehow food might materialize if he checked often enough. The refrigerator light illuminated nothing but a half-empty bottle of ketchup and some questionable leftovers, certainly nothing suitable for a hungry baby. In the living room, Elijah continued to cry, his tiny face red with effort, tiny fists clenched tight. "I know, buddy. I know," James murmured, lifting his son from the second-hand bassinet. He cradled the infant against his chest, bouncing gently in the way that sometimes soothed him. But there was no soothing hunger. 6 months ago, James had a wife, a stable job at the local factory, and a modest but comfortable life. Then came the layoffs. 2 months later, Marissa had packed her bags, leaving a note that simply said she couldn't do this anymore. The courts had awarded James full custody when Marissa failed to appear for their hearing. He'd felt victorious for all of 5 minutes before the crushing weight of sole responsibility settled on his shoulders. He'd been stretching his final unemployment check as far as it would go. The rent was paid, barely, but that left almost nothing for food. The baby formula had run out this morning, and the food bank wouldn't open until Monday. It was Friday night. James had swallowed his pride once already, calling his parents who lived 3 states away. His father's gruff voice had reminded him that real men provide for their families, before hanging up. He thought his brother might help. Michael had always been the softer of the 2 siblings, more understanding of life's complications. With Elijah balanced on one arm, James punched in what he thought was Michael's number. His fingers were clumsy with exhaustion, and he didn't notice the transposed digits until it was too late. "Hello?" A woman's voice answered, warm but confused. "Mike?" James asked, momentarily thrown. "No, this is Sarah. I think you have the wrong number." James was about to apologize and hang up when Elijah let out another piercing wail. The sound seemed to echo through the empty apartment, a testament to his failure as a father. "I'm sorry," he started to say, but something broke inside him. "I'm sorry, I meant to call my brother. My baby needs formula, and I'm completely out. I just need $50 to get enough to last the weekend. I swear I'll pay it back. I've never asked anyone for money before, but I don't know what else to do." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that James thought she might have hung up. He wouldn't blame her. Who asks a complete stranger for money? "Where are you?" Sarah finally asked, her voice gentle but cautious. "Riverside Apartments. Near downtown." He hadn't meant to answer so honestly, but desperation had stripped away his filters. "The blue buildings on Oakwood Street?" "Yes." Another pause. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. What's your apartment number?" James felt a rush of something between relief and shame. 3B, but you don't have to." 20 minutes, Sarah repeated, and the line went dead. James stared at the phone in disbelief. He had just begged a complete stranger for money, and she was coming over? It could be dangerous, she could be anyone. But what choice did he have? He looked down at Elijah, whose cries had subsided into whimpering hiccups, his tiny body exhausted from crying. "Help is coming, little man," James whispered, not entirely convinced himself. Sarah Matthews sat in her car outside the Riverside Apartments, gripping the steering wheel. The buildings loomed against the darkening sky, their blue paint peeling to reveal patches of gray underneath. She had driven here on impulse, grabbed her purse and keys the moment she hung up the phone. Now, common sense was catching up. This could be a scam. Some elaborate trick to rob her, or worse. She was a 32-year-old elementary school teacher who lived alone with her cat. Her friends would call her naive at best, reckless at worst, for driving to a stranger's apartment based on a wrong number and a sob story. But there had been something in that man's voice. A raw desperation she recognized from her classroom, the same tone she'd heard from children who came to school hungry, whose parents worked multiple jobs and still couldn't make ends meet. Sarah reached for her purse, checking that her pepper spray was accessible. Then she grabbed the plastic bag from the passenger seat containing the formula she'd stopped to buy on the way. $50 worth, as requested. She took a deep breath and got out of the car. The stairwell smelled of mildew and old cigarettes. A flickering light cast jumping shadows as she climbed to the third floor. Apartment 3B had a weathered door with peeling veneer and a tarnished brass number slightly askew. Sarah hesitated, then knocked. The door opened almost immediately, revealing a tall man with dark circles under his eyes and a baby clutched to his chest. The infant's face was blotchy from crying, his tiny body wrapped in what looked like a well-worn flannel shirt rather than a proper blanket. "Sarah?" the man asked, his voice hoarse. She nodded, suddenly at a loss for words. This wasn't what she had expected, though she wasn't sure what she had expected. Not this gaunt face with 3 days' worth of stubble, not those eyes filled with equal parts hope and shame. "I'm James," he said, stepping back slightly. "You really came." "I did." Sarah held up the bag. "I brought formula. I wasn't sure what kind your son needs, so I got a couple different ones." James's eyes widened, fixed on the bag as if it contained gold rather than baby formula. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You don't know what this means." Sarah stepped inside, her caution momentarily forgotten. The apartment was sparse but clean. A worn sofa with a faded quilt. A coffee table covered with job applications. No TV. No decorations except for a single framed photo of James holding a newborn, standing next to a hospital bed with a woman whose smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "How old is he?" Sarah asked, nodding toward the baby. "Elijah is 3 months, James answered, the pride in his voice unmistakable despite their circumstances. "He usually sleeps through the night now, but—" He trailed off, embarrassment coloring his features. "But he's hungry," Sarah finished for him. "Let's fix that." She moved toward the small kitchenette, opening cabinets until she found a bottle. "Do you have clean water?" "The tap water's fine here," James said, following her. "I'll show you how he likes it." For the next few minutes, they worked together in companionable silence, preparing the formula. Sarah watched as James tested the temperature on his wrist, his movements practiced and gentle. When he settled into the single armchair to feed Elijah, the baby's hungry gulps filled the quiet room. "I'm not usually like this," James said suddenly, his eyes fixed on his son. "I had a good job at Westfield Manufacturing for 5 years. Then they downsized, moved operations overseas. I've been looking for work ever since, but nothing steady. Just odd jobs, day labor when I can get it." "What about his mother?" Sarah asked softly, perching on the edge of the sofa. A shadow crossed James's face. "Marissa left 4 months ago. Said she never wanted to be a mother in the first place. The pregnancy wasn't planned, and I think she tried, but—" He shrugged, the gesture conveying volumes about broken promises and midnight arguments. "The courts gave me full custody." Sarah nodded, understanding more than she let on. Her own mother had walked out when she was 12, leaving her father to raise 3 children alone. "I really did mean to call my brother," James continued. "I transposed the digits. When you answered, I almost hung up, but Elijah was crying so hard, and I just broke. I'm glad you didn't hang up, Sarah said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. James looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time. Why did you come? You could have just hung up. Most people would have. Sarah considered the question. Why had she come? She barely volunteered at food drives, let alone personally delivered groceries to strangers. I heard Elijah crying, she said finally. And I heard something in your voice that told me you were telling the truth. James nodded, his attention returning to Elijah, who was now suckling more slowly, his tiny eyelids drooping with the contentment of a full belly. I would have found a way, he said quietly. I always do. But tonight I was scared I wouldn't. The raw honesty in his voice made Sarah's chest ache. She looked around the apartment again, noticing the details she'd missed at first glance. The bassinet with careful patches sewn into the fabric. The stack of library books on child development. The schedule pinned to the refrigerator with feeding times and nap times meticulously recorded. This was a man doing everything he could for his child, a man pushed to the breaking point not by laziness or poor choices, but by circumstances beyond his control. Do you have food for yourself? She asked. James's slight hesitation before answering told her everything. I'm fine, he said, with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to going without. Sarah stood up, decision made. I'm going to run to the store again. Is there anything in particular you like to eat? You don't have to do that, James protested. You've already done more than enough. James, Sarah said, her teacher voice slipping out, you can't take care of Elijah if you don't take care of yourself first. It's like the oxygen masks on airplanes, secure your own before helping others. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Are you always this bossy to strangers? Only the ones who need it, she replied with a grin. Now, preferences? Allergies? Or should I just surprise you? James surrendered with a slight shake of his head. Nothing fancy. Honestly, a loaf of bread and some peanut butter would be amazing right now. I'll be back soon, Sarah promised, heading for the door. She paused with her hand on the knob. Don't worry, I'll knock this time instead of calling the wrong number. His laughter followed her into the hallway, the sound warming her more than it should have. By the time Sarah returned with groceries, far more than just bread and peanut butter, Elijah was asleep in his bassinet, and James had managed to shower and change into a clean shirt. He looked younger without the weight of immediate crisis bearing down on him, the sharp lines of worry temporarily softened. They sat at his small kitchen table eating the sandwiches Sarah had prepared, talking in low voices to avoid waking the baby. James told her about his previous life, the steady job, the house they'd had to sell, the plans that had unraveled one by one. Sarah shared stories about her fourth-grade class, the challenges and joys of teaching in an underfunded school. I should go, Sarah said eventually, noticing the late hour. You both need rest. James walked her to the door, his gratitude evident in every gesture. I don't know how to thank you, he said. Or how to pay you back right now, but I will. Don't worry about paying me back, Sarah interrupted. Just pay it forward someday, when you can. She scribbled her phone number on a scrap of paper. The right number this time, she added with a smile. Call me if you need anything else. And the food bank opens Monday at 9, I volunteer there sometimes. I could meet you, show you the ropes. James took the paper, his fingers brushing hers. I'd like that, he said softly. Monday morning found James waiting outside the community center that housed the food bank, Elijah bundled against his chest in a carrier Sarah had brought over on Saturday. My niece outgrew it, she'd explained, though James suspected she'd bought it new. Sarah arrived precisely at 8:50, her smile brightening when she spotted them. You came, she said, sounding pleased. I said I would, James replied. Besides, Elijah was excited for a field trip, weren't you, buddy? He glanced down at his sleeping son with a grin. Inside, Sarah introduced James to the volunteers, explaining the process with the ease of someone familiar with the system. James noticed how she spoke to everyone with the same respect and warmth, whether they were donating or receiving. No one made him feel ashamed for needing help. Most people here have been on both sides of the table, Sarah told him as they loaded a box with staples. Last year, Marie over there needed assistance after her husband's heart attack. Now she volunteers every week. James nodded, absorbing this perspective shift. He'd always seen asking for help as a personal failure, not a temporary state in life's unpredictable journey. As they were leaving, a volunteer named Greg pulled James aside. "We're short-staffed on Thursdays," he said. "If you're interested in volunteering, we could use the help. Volunteers get first pick of the fresh produce," he added with a wink. James felt something unlock in his chest, the chance to give back rather than just receive, to be useful again. "I'd like that," he said. "I'd like that very much." The weeks that followed established a new rhythm to James's life. He volunteered at the food bank on Thursdays, took odd jobs when he could find them, and continued his relentless job search. Sarah became a regular presence in their lives, stopping by with children's books for Elijah or sometimes just to sit and talk. One evening in late October, James received a call from Westfield Manufacturing. They were reopening a smaller production line locally and wanted to interview former employees first. The position paid less than his previous job, but it offered stability and benefits, including healthcare for Elijah. He got the job. The night he received the offer, James called Sarah immediately. She arrived at his apartment 20 minutes later with a small cake and sparkling cider to celebrate. "I knew things would turn around for you," she said, her faith in him so unwavering it made his throat tight with emotion. "None of this would have happened without you," James replied. "That wrong number was the best mistake I ever made." Sarah smiled, her eyes soft in the dim light of his kitchen. Sometimes the universe has a way of connecting the people who need each other most. Elijah, now able to sit up on his own, banged enthusiastically on the high chair tray Sarah had found at a garage sale. His baby babble filled the small apartment, a joyful soundtrack to their modest celebration. Looking at them, this woman who had become so important to him and the son who was his entire world, James felt a fullness in his heart he'd almost forgotten was possible. From the depths of despair, he had found not just help but connection, not just survival but the promise of thriving. 3 years later, James stood in the kitchen of a small house, their house, bought with careful saving and a first-time homebuyer program Sarah had researched. Through the window, he could see Sarah chasing a giggling Elijah around the backyard, their laughter carrying on the spring breeze. His phone buzzed with a text from Greg at the food bank, confirming tomorrow's volunteer schedule. James and Sarah still volunteered regularly, now bringing Elijah along to sort canned goods and charm the elderly patrons. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like the number 3, Elijah's upcoming birthday, was a faded piece of paper with Sarah's phone number, the right number, the one that had changed everything. James stepped outside, joining his family in the yard. Elijah ran to him immediately, small arms wrapping around his legs. "Daddy! Sarah's gonna push me on the swing." "Is she now?" James caught Sarah's eye over their son's head, the love between them as solid and real as the ground beneath their feet. Sarah smiled, crossing the lawn to join them. "I was thinking," she said casually, though her eyes held a spark of excitement, "maybe it's time we made things official." "What things?" James asked, though he knew exactly what she meant. Sarah rolled her eyes fondly. "Us. This family we've built. Elijah already calls me his second mom when he introduces me to people." "James.